Tonight's question, PNN will be meeting with the TRTA on Monday afternoon, so if there's anything to report, we will certainly let you know. The regional schools meeting that was scheduled for tomorrow night has been canceled because of the snow is wreaking havoc with everybody's meeting schedules. Speaking of snow and its impact on our calendar, when I met with the superintendent earlier today, we were talking about the last day of school and the potential for another storm next week. So, Mr. Forget, would you like to add anything to that?
I guess more than add, but to explain where we are at currently. So today was our 9th snow day, which means our original last day of school, which was June 13th, is now Tuesday, June 26th. So just as a reminder, by law, all 180 days must be completed by June 30th. Any days that occur before April 1st have to be made up, period. After April 1st, you only have to make up those first 5 that you scheduled. Remember, we schedule 185 days. So if we make it to April 1st, we've clearly used more than the 5, so we're safe. So we have got, what's today, the 14th? We have got 31 days. We've got 17 days to go to be in the clear. Unfortunately, if you're a fan of the weather, you've been looking at their forecast, and they're already talking about another storm next Tuesday, Wednesday. And our precision weather has called it, not saying numbers yet, but it's certainly a storm that they're watching, that it has potential. So we have to be ready with some options. I don't want to say there's never been a relaxing of the expectation. 2011 was the last year that there was a significant year like this, where districts were having 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 snow days, and there was no relaxing by the commissioner. There was an advisory put out, and said, start planning, figure out how to do it. So we would be required to either hold school on Saturdays, take back any holidays that exist. Actually, I would say we would have to go at vacations before we went to holidays, because we run into issues with holidays. So I would say we would have to make a decision by April vacation if we find ourselves needing more days. I would propose at this point that as of today, we're at June 26th. I would not suggest we change anything at this point. I sent out that email this morning, and it was not tended to be a survey, but it certainly was read as a poll. And so I had lots of feedback today about what parents would like to see, and it is across the board. Please take Saturdays, please take April vacation. Let's just ride it out into June. My child's starting camp on June 25th, family vacation on June 24th. So there are it's all over the place. So there is no good answer. We would assume that regardless of what we do, those days that we would be making up, they're going to be low participation days. Another question that keeps getting asked is, can we quickly implement blizzard bags? I don't believe the answer is yes. Whether or not, regardless of what we believe about blizzard bags, my understanding is the Department of Ed put out some guidance on, what are they being called? Alternative learning days. And that has to be approved. You have to approve a plan as a school committee for alternative learning days in order for them to count as part of the 180. So we clearly do not have a plan tonight to propose to you for alternative learning days. So that wouldn't be something, and we could not do them retroactively. So blizzard bags is certainly something we can discuss for the future. I have my opinions about the value of them, but I think for the time being, the question is, would you like to pursue having a formal discussion at least about what you would like to do if we do need to have more days? Or would you like to wait? But at this point, my recommendation would be we sit on June 22nd, I'm sorry, 26th, not 22nd, Tuesday, June 26th as the final day of school.
I think this definitely warrants discussion again at our April meeting. By then, we'll know if we are indeed impacted by a potential storm next week, and it'll be close, but you know,
Okay.
we'll see. And I think, you know, looking at the blizzard bag, at least because that was mentioned before. I think Tina had mentioned that before, that, you know, people have approached her about it. Probably worth looking into and having a discussion about being prepared for next year if they're needed.
So one other factor, and I meant to put this in the email, and it was the single most frequent question as a follow-up. Graduation, I believe I included this in my report tonight, so I'll get to that, but just as part of this discussion, graduation does not need to be adjusted. This is Mother Nature's gift to the class of 2018. You imagine Twitter and Facebook has been quite active with suggestions about when to close and every day. So that is something that we do not need to adjust. You could, as a committee, choose to adjust, but the requirement is that the original schedule the last day of school for seniors is no more than 12 days prior to the originally scheduled last day of school. So when we scheduled the 13th and graduation on the 2nd, we were well within those limits. But we've clearly gone outside that. But at this point, the logistics to try and change graduation would be, I can just look at any of the high school folks who are here. You can see them start to sweat. Forget about all the festivities that we plan, but then all of the families that have, families coming from out of town and plane tickets are purchased, it would be crazy. So certainly my recommendation would be to leave it alone. Next year, we are looking at graduation would fall even earlier, June 1st, correct? Right, if we use the same pattern, it would be June 1st. So we're looking at, and you'll see tonight, moving it to June 8th. So we're at least one further week out. And there was a collective sigh of all juniors at Triton High School. But just moving it 1 week out, so at least we try and preemptively. This seems to be the pattern. There was a question asked, and Patty went back to 2004. And the average over 14 years was 3-point-something days per year, but over the last 4 years, we're averaging 4 or 5 days, and this year is certainly going to up our average, so it seems to be the new trend.
Definitely. Thank you.
Brian, I just wanted to make one comment about some things I've heard today, and that is parents that are concerned that have middle schoolers or kids in elementary school that are asking for those recognition ceremonies not to be held on the 25th or 26th, try to do them up to the 22nd, Friday the 22nd, just because people are leaving, going away on vacation if their kids aren't coming in on the 25th, 26th,
Okay.
and they miss out on their recognition ceremonies.
So pulling back, like sixth grade graduation, for lack of a better term.
Keeping these ceremonies
that.
the normal dates that they were scheduled for, if they're even scheduled. I'm not even sure if those are scheduled yet.
It's
But-
generally the final week of school. It's a night or two before the final day of school. I think if we're talking about Tuesday, so we're coming back on a Monday, the 25th, and Tuesday a half day, I think we could talk about scheduling the week prior. Too much ahead of that, sixth grade senioritis sets in.
Oh, sure, no, yeah, I understand.
So I think it's problematic to put it too much further back, but it's certainly something we can consider.
Yeah.
Yep,
No, I just wanted to
absolutely.
mention it
That's
because
a
it
good
was
point.
brought up to me
Yeah.
several times
Yep.
today. So.
Great. Last thing I wanted to mention, again, in talking to the superintendent, and given the budget situation that we're in right now, and recognizing that we might have to be going to a Plan B budget, our May meeting is scheduled for the 11th. Is that right? No, the 9th. The 9th. Pushing that back a week to May 16th instead of the 9th. Because Salisbury, which is the last town to have town meeting, is the 14th. Does anybody have an issue with that? And I'm thinking if we schedule that now and make that adjustment now, it allows people to plan work schedules or any other adjustments that need to be made. It would be the 16th versus the week before, the 9th. No, I'm not seeing anybody objecting to that, so we'll make that change. Wonderful. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the?
I'll make a
consent-
motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Before we get into discussion, I just want to read the donations. Painting sets and costumes valued at $100 donated by Joan Gallivan to be used for productions at the high school. An anonymous donation of an electric guitar and mini practice amp valued at $400 to be used for small group rehearsing in guitar classes and with performing groups. An anonymous donation of $250 to be used as assistance toward a student attending the spring trip. An anonymous donation of $100 to be used as assistance towards a student attending the spring trip. And a donation of $5,000 from John Duff, MD, to the Cynthia Duff Goffman Memorial Scholarship Fund. We thank everybody for those donations. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda?
I have a question about
Yep.
the financial statement.
Monique? Yep, go right ahead. Now's the time.
On the Annex 4, I just want to understand it because of the increase in the substitute budget. I guess I didn't understand this. It says substitutes budget 238,000. Anyway, we get to the end and we haven't spent quite 50%, and we're 50% past the school year, so we seem to be on the money. I didn't understand why we wanted that increase.
We have not hit personal day season.
Oh, okay, all right.
Anyone else? On that same page, actually, I had a question on, and I've already asked this when I met with the superintendent, but it bears asking today, under the superintendent line. Do you want to explain what the discrepancy is, Brian?
So there's, I'm trying to find it as you're talking.
Page
Trying to catch up
39.
with you. I went past it. So there's an overage of 1,500 on, it says superintendent, it's not salaries, that actually includes my salary, Patricia Morelli's salary, and professional expenses, and it's actually expenses on memberships, everything that carries a membership now. There's, so for example, Mass Association of School Superintendents carries a membership for me, a fee, but it also carries a membership fee for you, so there's this cross, that there's more being charged to that line. It's not an increase in salary, it's not any other obscure charges. And then there were, so you were going to say?
No, I just wanted to add that that line includes the new superintendent induction program that was never budgeted for. We actually just kind of took it out of any other spare account that we had. So the budget increase you actually see for this year, which is the third year for FY19. So that's definitely part of the overrun in that account.
Okay, but that has been accounted for this coming,
Yes, for FY19.
because that was what my concern was. The other,
So next year will be the third year of the NISIP program, and I will graduate.
I know, you'll graduate. Big ceremony, cap and gown.
Yes.
The other questions I had that I asked of the superintendent were about the transportation and travel and the medical. There was a medical one. All that are related to special ed. So again, those are ones that are more out of our control. But the superintendent line I did question because that we should know what the budgeting is for. Any other questions on the consent agenda? All in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to student report.
Hi everyone, today is Wednesday, March 14th. February vacation lasted from the 19th to the 23rd, and though some students went to warm places for vacation, groups like theater stayed at school and spent their break practicing hard. The spring musical, Zombie Prom, was performed from Friday, March 9th to Sunday, March 11th. Directed by Shay Reardon and choreographed by Deb Beal with costumes by Lisa Johnson, the 1950s nuclear love story entertained the whole family and provided a good distraction for those without power at home over the weekend. Due to the recent storm, regrettably a few events had to be canceled or rescheduled at Triton. Organized by Ms. Kovach and Ms. Norton, a school-wide blood drive was planned for Tuesday, March 13th in the middle school gym. Participants had to be above age 16 with parental consent, and many students had signed up to donate. Many students participated in an English assignment called the Media Fast. From phones to television to even the radio, students spent 24 hours without contact from any form of media, and then wrote graded essays about the experience. Though there were many complaints at first, most students gained a different view about how they are influenced by modern technology at the end of the experiment. On March 14th, there was scheduled to be a walkout organized by seniors Sarah Stackpole and Haley Morgan, where students planned to walk out of class at 10 o'clock and go to the gym while remaining silent for 17 minutes in remembrance of the 17 lives lost at the Parkland shooting. Due to the snow day, this event could not occur, but Student Council had spread an online RSVP where many students confirmed that they would attend in support of stricter gun laws nationwide. Student Council continues to work toward improving different aspects of our school through student-created committees involving things like expanding library passes and graduation robes. Triton Student Council plans to attend the Spring Massachusetts Association of Student Councils on April 26th, where students hope to learn leadership skills and improve communication within the council. They expect a large number of students going to the event, as attendance has increased over the last few conferences. Thank you, and please ask any questions.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Thank you so much for your report. Anybody have anything for new business that you want put on the agenda in future meetings? Okay, moving on to reports and deliberations. Next on the agenda is the District Communications Committee, which was held on February 15th. We had the minutes in here. Did anybody have any questions or comments on that meeting? Our next meeting will be next Thursday on the 22nd. On the agenda will be the budget, of course, and the landlord-tenant update. Okay, moving on to, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for reminding me. Oral communications from the public. Anybody here want to address the school committee? I inadvertently skipped that. Thank you. District Wellness.
I have a brief update on the work that the Wellness Committee has been doing over the past year. Just to give a little background, the health standards have not been updated since 1999. Included in these standards are the following: physical health, social and emotional health, safety and prevention, personal and community health. So these standards were the basis that most of the schools generated their curriculums around. Over the last few years, the social and emotional piece of health has kind of blown up. So as it's blown up, I think more and more schools are looking to find programs or curriculum that really help support the whole child. So in our attempt to, and the Wellness Committee, in our attempt to do a needs assessment to say, where are we as a district in regards to teaching those health standards, and where can we improve upon? We were especially focusing on that social and emotional piece. So what we decided to do then is we first needed a new framework to look at these standards. And if you look at the supporting document that you have in your packet, it has a small picture of circles that overlap, and that really takes into consideration not just the old standards from 1999, but also some of the new standards that we felt were really important in developing that whole child. We refer to these not just as standards, but really they're different domains that a student really, we would like to see flourish and support students through. So this circular graphic of all of the domains really illustrates within it all the different standards. So it's taking the old standards and the new standards. So after we had kind of a new structure to really start to think about our wellness within the community or the Triton community, we then developed a needs assessment. So we first went out and collected information from all the different schools, asking the schools, what do you do under each of these domains? And we took a survey, and we actually came out with a lot of different things, a lot of great things that are happening. And the way we structured it, too, fits into the multi-tiered system of support, so we could see what type of supports were happening for everybody, for some people in that tier 2, and then for a very small population. Because what they show as far as successful wellness programs district-wide, you want to make sure that you hit all of the different tiers so that you have something for everybody, and if somebody needs more, you have that intervention for them. So we took a step back and we have all of this documented. So for every single domain, we have all the different tiered intervention and supports. So I think we were taken back by all the things that we do that we were thinking we needed, but what clearly came out from that needs assessment are areas that we need to strengthen or even just add programming. So I know that there's been a lot of talk about adding a wellness teacher at the high school, And I would say at the middle school too, one of the areas that we found as a significant weakness is sex education and that physical development piece. Currently, we have no programs, and that is mandated from the state. So that would be an area that we plan to look at for next year and incorporating at the high school and at the middle school level, that parents can opt out of that. There are strict guidelines that you need to follow, but we do not at this point offer anything. I think one of the positive things that working with the Wellness Committee is the implementation of our let's say drug abuse, substance abuse program, which starts at 4th grade, and there's some talks at the high school right now to move that up to 9th graders so that they would have some substance abuse education as well. We're using a research-based program that is supported both financially and also through their policy, so that's been very helpful to be able to do that. And we're also looking at, there's other small things that we're doing. I know we have somebody coming in and doing some oral health hygiene, which is part of our Massachusetts standards. So pulling also from community members to strengthen our health curriculum, and really just trying to enhance the domains of all of those pieces that are so important and critical to child development. So that's where we are. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions? Thank you, Kim. That was a very brief synopsis of a very busy committee.
It's so big, I know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on to the middle and high school aligned schedule.
So I'm going to hand this over to Tim, Al, and Megan. I'm not sure who's leading the charge, who's the spokesperson, but we have to at least stand up. Yeah, you guys can just come and sit right around the edge of the table here. Cozy. Oh, they're all leaving. Must have run away.
All right. I don't know how we want to do this. I know you guys have a kind of one-pager in front of you, two-pager. So we've been asked to align schedules, and I think we've talked about the reasons. I was asked to align with the high school schedule probably about 5 years ago now from the last superintendent. That was quite a process, and ended up not working for a very amount of reasons. And it kind of went back burner. We changed the schedule in the middle school, and then some conversations given dropping enrollment and other factors, budget, opportunities for students. Over the last few years, the decision was made to, let's try to see if we can align the schedules. Not necessarily align to the high school schedule, but have an aligned schedule. So the process, the second process was probably another couple of years. And we have gone through a lot of different options. We've looked at 6-day schedules, we've looked at 5-day schedules, we've looked at non-drops, we've looked at drops. Ultimately, we came down to a 7-day schedule that you see a schematic of in your paperwork. I think it works best. I think being honest, it's probably a little big for the middle school, and it's probably a 6-day would have been a little too small for the high school. That's kind of how we've talked about it. But needing graduation requirements, needing to have, as Brian talked about last night, the breadth of opportunities for high school kids, we were able to kind of come up with something that I think works for both schools. You're talking about two different schools with two very different needs, so there's a lot going on. One of the things I tried to stay away from, or we tried to stay away from, was we don't want a lot of dead time in the schedule. Like, we've had a 25-minute flex in middle school, or half-an-hour flex in middle school for years. I've never liked it. It's just something so the other group of kids can go to lunch, and it never really had any value. So we tried to kind of work that out. You will see that we don't have G period in the middle school schedule right now, so we've had to kind of adopt that into our schedule to make this truly align. So that would be a directed study for middle school kids, but it's also when you're in a school that has 140-plus kids in band and chorus, which the middle school has, they don't have very many opportunities to get together and practice. I think the chorus can never get together and practice, and the band can do it once a week, if that. So that period will give us a lot more opportunity for that, as well as we started a coding course and an engineering course a couple years ago. We had to let that drop because we just didn't have any time for it. We could bring things back in like that. And, there's some opportunities there. That would probably be the first place where we'd share a teacher with the high school if we had to get to that point, I think. So that's a little bit of the history. I will also say for the middle school, one thing I hear from teachers over and over again is that I've had comments like, if I could just have this group of kids one more time in a day, if I could just have this group, another time this week. And I've never been able to offer that because it's just never been any time. I've been able to build in a period what I'm going to call content literacy. You might call it at elementary school a WIN block, different names, different places. But it's a block of time that I, as a principal, have a little bit of control over and can kind of direct where the kids go and direct what the teachers do with those kids, which I've never been able to do. Because contractually, teachers have always had, it's five periods and a prep period. They are now going to have 4 periods in this block and a prep period. So our numbers are able to do that. The class sizes will be a nudge higher than they would have been. But when I spoke to teachers about it, would you rather have 4 classes and then a 5th class to work with the kids you really need to work with, or the 5 classes, the ones I've spoken to, who I thought would give me an honest answer, they were like, I'd rather have the 4 and the 1. So that's what we've kind of built in. What happens in that block can be obviously working with struggling learners, but it can also be something we do for kids who are on the other end of the equation, which we've never done anything for since I've been in middle school. And we can do some extension activities and all that. The trick to that's going to be planning and scheduling where those kids go. And there will be a lot of, I think Megan can certainly attest, there's going to be a lot of little tweaks to this that's going to have to be done as we go along. And there may be stuff that's going to pop up that we haven't quite seen yet. With Megan's help, we've been able to put it into Aspen as kind of a mock-up, and we've run some schedules. We've run schedules for kids. We've run schedules for teachers. It does rotate. It does seem to work. We can't do that whole process yet because we don't have the actual data from the incoming 6th graders moving up. And if we were to do something like that, it would screw up the middle school schedule as it is right now. So you can't kind of go all the way with it to see if it's perfectly going to work, but I think we're relatively confident with a few bumps maybe we can get it to work and it'll work well. I have brought this to the middle school teachers. We had a faculty meeting and I gave them it electronically. We talked about it. I've got very surprisingly, and maybe the snow days have helped, I don't know, but I've got very little feedback. A couple of things. One concern from teachers is obviously the de-teaming. What I'll say about that, excuse me, a lot of snow removal today, I'm a little dry. What I'll say about the teaming is, and like I said on Monday, we can keep loose teams together. What teams do is it restricts what you can do schedule-wise. As our enrollment drops, we won't be able to sustain teams. And my thinking is if we're going to go to a new schedule, let's go to a new schedule and do it all at once and kind of rip the Band-Aid, if you will. I don't think we're going to lose the community feel of the middle school. The teachers for right now are going to stay in the same rooms. They're going to stay in their same groups. It just gives us the flexibility to be able to say, maybe this kid's not going to work in this English class. I can move him to the other English class, where we're kind of hard to do that now when you want to keep the teams in the way they are. So I guess that's all I have to say. I don't know if you guys want to talk about the high school piece to this.
I'll talk a little bit. So I wanted to thank Megan and Al. I'm still learning Aspen. I've been doing scheduling for a long time now, but Megan is really the guru. And all I know now is that I don't want to spend district money, but I need some training in Aspen because I'm used to Power School and IPASS. And Al, they've just been amazing. I've just kind of gone along for the ride, trying to throw my 2 cents in. Why would this work? Would that work? And they've said, well, this would work, but that might not. And so just in past experiences, trying to throw roadblocks in their way to think around, and they were already 4 steps ahead of me every single time I tried. So I have let the high school faculty know. I've talked to the PCs about it, and more for opportunities at helping staff remain and offering opportunities back and forth. But the conversation at the middle school has been different than the conversation in the high school because it really doesn't affect the high school. I mean, our schedule doesn't change. It stays the same for the most part. There are very little concessions that the high schools had to make, and I appreciate the efforts again from Al and Rob on that, where they've really done a lot of the work, and Al's really done a lot of work with keeping the teams as together as possible. Megan, I think, could talk a little bit more about the Aspen part of it, and no schedule is perfect. There are 2 things I always say: that there are always going to be concessions that have to be made in schedules. There are always going to be things that pop up. School improvement plans are never done. They're always a work in progress, and schedules are never 100% complete. They're always a work in progress, and those are 2 of the things. But I'll let Megan talk more about the actual structural aspects of the schedule.
Yeah, so I can just speak to the changes to the high school, and I agree. I've been to a number of scheduling workshops and different times when we've brainstormed options, and people are generally always looking to improve a schedule, and there's never a perfect one out there. So there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of troubleshooting involved, and I think that this one, given the time constraints and given just the different pieces we need to have in place, is truly a good option. And the middle school definitely did have to make, I think, some more concessions in the sense that because the high school has to think of graduation requirements and the courses that we're offering students to make sure they're competitive for colleges and things like that, we couldn't lose a period within our structure. So that kind of bound us to a couple things. So again, for the high school version, if anyone has lived it before, it has been always a 7-day, 6-period schedule where 1 period drops each day. But in the past, the morning classes have rotated around each other and the afternoon classes have rotated around each other. So you'd never have an afternoon class in the morning and vice versa. But now this does go the whole way through, which is actually, in the past, we have done some staff surveys about, from the high school perspective, of what they wanted to see in a schedule, and that's the #1 kind of most agreed upon thing. Because sometimes if there's students that you always see right after lunch and they're kind of dragging, this gives you the opportunity to see them at a different point in the day, which is nice. So again, it has a full rotation. It's what's typically called a waterfall rotation. So it'll go the whole way through. The other piece that changes for the high school is currently we have just 1 period at the end of the school day after lunch, and this would be 2, because a concern at the middle school was that it would be a pretty big shift for them in terms of timing and when the middle schoolers would be eating lunch if we kept it in the current spot. So it's actually moved a period earlier in the day. So I can see some advantages for the high school on that too. And then the big thing was trying to integrate. What we had to do is find a way to integrate 4 lunches, 2 middle school and 2 high school, into this schedule. So that's where you kind of see it might be a little hard to kind of follow. Again, sometimes with the schedule, it's easier to live it than to read it. But the kind of outlines how we were able to get around that. So what it does mean for the high school is going back to having a split lunch, where some classes will have class for a little bit, lunch, and then class, and then switch. So that was kind of a way for us to solve making sure we got 4 groups of lunches for the entire building through there. So that's kind of, those are the major things from the high school perspective.
Thank you. Questions? Linda?
I think it's more of a comment than a question. I guess I got to get closer. I applaud all of you for this work that you've done, especially for the middle school, because I think some of those kids at the elementary, they do a great job of differentiating the kids who are overachievers and the kids who are struggling, and the high school does too. It's the middle school where those kids get trapped in that, and I think that's probably why we lose some of the kids going to the to other high schools. I think doing this, allowing students to, the 8th graders go up to the high school and see what classes are being offered up there may benefit the school keeping kids here. So I applaud you for thinking outside the box here.
Monique?
Schedules are a nightmare. I spent a lot of time working on them myself, and it was one part of my job I never liked. But the split lunch that you have every day, that's pretty hard to do when you're teaching. Have you gotten any feedback on that? That's going to be every day.
Yeah, it rotates, so it's not the same period, which is good. It's only that one period for your class every week. And that also is an attempt to get rid of that 25-minute flex block I was talking about. We've gone through about, I don't know, 10 different variations of that lunch rotation. Lunch is, honestly, when you do the scheduling, it's the biggest bugaboo there is, because you have to serve a lunch, and it's hard to do it in a balanced way. So the high school has had that before. They had it for a number of years, and I think we were able to get rid of it because we dropped the lunch, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so we went from 3 lunches in high school to 2. So I know that in talking to Catherine, when she was the principal prior, she'd say that some teachers would come to her and ask for that class, to have that split class. So I'm sure there's going to be, there's going to be some happiness with this. There's going to probably be some tears on some level with this, including my own. But I think for all the little things like that aren't great, I think there's some stuff in here that's overcomes that. The good outweighs it. I have a mental picture of how this is going to work, and if it works the way it worked, I feel like it should work. I think we get a lot of bang for our buck. And what I like about it is we're putting kids who are struggling in math with a math teacher for extra help. It's not a special ed teacher. No knock on them. They do a great job. It's not an IA. It's a math teacher who knows the student, who knows what the student needs. And they can say, I will see you later today, and content literacy will go over this. We can't do that now. And this schedule will be able to do that.
Teachers you said there's teachers that have worked with this split lunch before? So they're used to
school.
it. Some
High
of them
school,
are
yeah,
used to it.
yeah.
Yeah, high school, we just got rid of it a few years ago, so we used to have 3 lunches at the high school.
Yeah.
So some classes did
Years, yeah.
did do where they had class, then lunch, then class. So we have done it before. This is a slightly different time block. And actually, again, the benefit is that it only happens to a specific class once in a 7-day cycle. So it's not every day. So even when we had it before, some classes would run into it 2 or 3 times in a 7-day cycle, but every class would only have it once.
If you're a student, you get it every day, 4th period. It's just a different
Every day,
subject.
correct. Yes, you do.
Paul?
I just have another question about that split. Is that going to happen at the middle school as well, the split lunch?
No, the middle school, what the middle school gets out of that is a 75-minute block.
Yeah, it's a longer block, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, it rotates, so
Okay, thank you.
Narissa?
Can I just ask a question back to so how does that work? So that doesn't happen for every student every day, the split?
Well, yes, every day they'd have a split if they have a class during lunch block, which most of the time, but not.
would have a class.
But right. Well, every student obviously will run into that 4th period, and for some students it might be a study hall, which will be less of a issue.
Gotcha.
But every student will go through it. But for any given student, maybe on day 1, that split class will happen in their math class. On day 2, it might be their English class. On day 3, it might be their study hall. On day 4, it might be their PE class.
Okay.
So which class it is will change for a student.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Narissa?
Al, just a quick question on kind of the experience of students coming into the middle school for their first year. It seems like this takes an already tense time for them and makes it a lot more tense. Do you have a plan to help bring
Yeah.
this in and kind of make it livable?
Yeah,
For
this is
7th
going to be
graders?
some culture shock for 7th graders, for sure. I mean, the schedule we have now is, and it's 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Yeah, I plan on trying to do, I'm not quite the specifics of it, but, you know, we did a locker night last year. I'm thinking about maybe we do 3 of those. We do a schedule night, whatever you want to call it. Just a lot more opportunities for incoming 7th graders to come up with their parents and kind of look at it, looked at the area, the physical space, what the schedule means to them within that space. Just a lot more outreach like that. Like I said, I haven't got the specifics of how that would work. I'm going to talk to my student services team about that going forward. But yeah, this is going to be a pretty big adjustment. And it's going to be an adjustment for the 7th graders going to 8th. I think they'll be able to handle it easier. But you can also look at it, they'll be much more prepared for high school because it's going to be the exact same schedule. So.
Maureen?
And can I just one more piece on that is that at the elementary level, we're looking at departmentalizing at 5th and 6th, which will help that transition as well. So rather than all new to all new, it's kind of a logical progression.
Yes. So maybe I'm misunderstanding, but at least in the elementary school levels, they travel as a class still.
Yes.
And in this, I'm assuming that they're going to literally it could be a third of your last class, could be in your next class. They're not going to travel as a group, right?
And that's how it is now.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a much different.
But it's much more, it's bigger, yeah,
Aimed.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said Monday, we are going to try to do this so that we're going to minimize the amount of kids going up and down. I wouldn't want a kid to go up for math, down for English, go up for science. That wouldn't make any sense. So that's what I was talking about. We're going to have to do a lot more hand scheduling that way. So, yeah, that's definitely a concern.
Maureen?
I was just going to make a suggestion for, if you're doing something during the summer, maybe modeling it after what the high school does for open house nights, where you guys run like the actual schedule. It's just really helpful as a parent who's participated in that. You know, if you're sitting there with your child, it might be nice to run through that schedule together with your rising 7th grader. So
Yeah.
just want to make that
That's great,
suggestion.
great idea.
Dan, and then Paul.
So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but, and that you're talking about the mechanics of how to make it work, but is part of the reason to do it is so that for programs and differentiation, we could take an accelerated student, say, and they would be able to be exposed to programs up the line at the high school. Is that right?
Correct. Yep. Yep.
Is that what we envision as part of this, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, with an aligned schedule, you could conceivably give an 8th grader, you know, it would be a walk, but they could have a 9th grade geometry class or something, because, you know, Algebra 1's not there. They're good with that. It definitely gives that opportunity.
And then you also mentioned that on the other end, it also gives opportunity for struggling students to get additional help. Indeed, not just from, say, an IA or an aide of some kind, but from
With the actual classroom teacher.
How is that aided by the schedule change?
Because contractually, teachers are given 5 classes in a prep and a supervisory period. That's what it says in the contract for secondary teachers. What we've been able to do is assign the teachers 4 classes. So they're going to have the whole group of students in 8th grade are going to, you know, or half the 8th grade will have a teacher for 4 classes. They'll have those kids for 4 classes. Their 5th class that day for that teacher will be another group of students that they've had, hopefully, the way I have it envisioned, that they've had already that day, that they've identified as kind of struggling a little bit. We should be able to do a lot of that with the data we have from iReady and other, the Common Writing Assessment and other data points that we have. A lot of those kids can be scheduled going into the year. There may have to be some moving around after the year begins just by kids identifying. You know, we're still kind of working on how we're going to work like a science teacher. I know that teachers this year feel the kids aren't really prepared with lab report writing like they should be. So, and with the STEM scopes being new, there's certainly some opportunities for them to work with a group of kids who are struggling in science. So that piece of it will work itself out. I'm pretty confident it'll work itself out.
Paul?
So Brian, I think this is your question, but so most of these teaching periods are 55, 56 minutes. That 75-minute block at the high school, at the middle school, how is that going to work with the TRTA and whether it's 4 courses or 5 courses? I mean, that's 75 minutes is an extra 20 minutes of instruction.
So at the middle school, it would rotate, so the others would be shorter. mentioned, this is proactive because inevitably we see decreasing enrollment coming. And this allows us to, I think as Al mentioned it, let's do it now and fix it and get ready for it rather than having to react later on. So just to make sure that they're clear that I have every confidence it's going to go well, but there absolutely will be kinks. There will probably be things we'll have to address with the association. But to date, the discussions have been very positive. I think everyone understands there's gains and there's trade-offs, and ultimately the gains win out. And then the second thing I want to say, and make sure I say clearly, and maybe 3 times, is that this is not an attempt to merge the middle school and high school. This was perhaps born out of a past attempt. It went away. It has emerged or reemerged as a discussion about efficiencies and making sure that we can use our resources to the best of our ability, and respond to a changing population. So I think I personally believe, and as they've said, that benefits far outweigh the quirks here and there. But just to be clear, I guess I'll say it just twice, this is not an attempt to merge the middle school and the high school, because I already know it's flying around that this is an attempt to push people out, to merge the 2 schools. It is just categorically untrue.
Paul?
Can I just ask one more question? This is a Kim question. So Kim, with honors math at the 8th grade, is it very likely that that same course is being taught 9th grade presently, math, that same program, so there's a hope that we could collapse some of that?
Come over here. There's an extra chair.
Hi. With the new math standards and the different route to take different courses, there's a lot of different flexibility out there for 8th graders to take some higher level courses to be better prepared when they get to the high school. So I think I mentioned it to Al a couple weeks ago, but he's got a lot going on up there. But yes, definitely a lot of opportunities, especially in the area of mathematics, for some accelerated classes.
Anybody else? Well, again, I'd like to thank you all for the hard work you put into this. As you had said before, Brian, that none of these schedules are perfect. I know, I haven't had a high school here in a few years now, but I know every single year there was always a bump for somebody, So it just shows that even in an established schedule, there's going to be hiccups that we have to work around. But I'm confident that with the brilliant minds we have sitting at this table, they'll be ironed out. And I know, Al, you put in a tremendous amount of time in this, and kudos to you, because I'm sure there were sleepless nights.
And can I just point out one more other thing, because we didn't mention it tonight. It came up no, we weren't here last night. Monday. Time is gone. Monday night, it was mentioned that the reduction of the foreign language teacher. So that's a result of the discussion about the 4 core classes, so that the foreign language goes into the unified arts rotation, if you will. So students are still, and I don't know if you want to speak to that, what your thinking is at this point, because I know, and actually don't even speak to it yet, because it's an evolving, one of those evolving discussions, but we will still retain a Spanish and a French teacher at the high school, and the intention is students will stay in those classes both years.
I'll just say on that since this has been released, they've had a lot of good ideas they've hitting me with, and I'm working through them with them right now. Nothing I can talk about because it's all up in the air, but they do have some good ideas about the best way to give foreign language instruction to the middle school. So, the 2 teachers.
Anybody else have any questions concerning the schedule? Paul?
Sorry, I could ask a million questions on this all night, and this is sort of from the ghost of merger, but, so when the 7th and 8th grade parents come in to meet with teams, how is that going to work in the future?
That's
To
a good
find out how
question.
Johnny's doing.
I was actually talking with the assistant principal about this the other day. We're going to have to rework just the model of how we do our parent conferences, for sure, because it won't be as tidy as having a group of 6 teachers talking to a parent. It might have to go back to an older model where teachers come and parents come and talk to teachers they want to. They're in their rooms. I don't know. We haven't thought that all the way through, but it will impact that for sure.
Anyone else? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, moving on to the NEASC letter, Mr. Forget.
Yes, so you have a letter in your packet that was written by me to George Edwards, who is the Director of the Commission on Public Schools, K through 12 schools for NEASC. We got back into the process. You're aware, many schools stepped away from NEASC. NEASC did quite a bit of soul searching over the course of several years, meeting with superintendents, different associations, have significantly revised their process. The most important change in the process is that they've streamlined the standards, and rather than having a separate, completely separate, coinciding process, NEASC actually looks to the school improvement planning process to align the NEASC goals and to align the process for review with what the school is saying the priorities are. So the way that we do our school improvement plans, being a January presentation with the budget, I personally think it's a good thing. I think we all like the timing and that it causes us to have discussions about planning and spending and making sure they're tied. But it's a little opposite as far as a NEASC process. So there's quite a bit of follow-up that Tim Ruggieri has to do with the high school staff to make sure that that's a collective process. So as we were meeting and talking, I had a conversation with George, kind of got the sense that there's certainly the new and improved NEASC is a much more realistic and flexible group. Their goal is to help folks maintain their accreditation. So in raising some concerns, Tim and I met with George and not sure of what the outcome would be, but he was very amenable to the concept of us delaying a year. And what that does is currently the process would be a collaborative conference this spring, April, May, which is 2 years ahead of the visit, which was scheduled for 2020. That would mean that the plan that was just produced in January needs to be done and ready for showtime, collaborated, have an entire high school wrapped around that in a very short span of time. Now we're talking within 5-6 weeks. That became problematic, not because of anything that did or didn't happen, but simply because of our process and where we stepped back in. So George was very amenable to that request, understood it completely. He could have changed the process within calendar year 20. So we are a 2020 school, meaning we were March, right? It was March 20th of 2020. He could have fluctuated it anywhere within calendar 20. What we're asking, and you can see in the letter obviously, is to delay it 1 full year. And what that does is that allows Tim and the leadership team at the high school to spend this entire calendar year taking what they had as a school improvement plan and really treat it as a draft and go back to the faculty and just, I don't want to use it, hammer it, but really tear it apart and make it a collaborative document. So that's the plan. It certainly made sense to George, made sense to Tim and I. He asked to get outside of calendar 20, it had to be a discussion with the commission, an official request to the commission. Obviously, he's the director of the commission. I'm assuming he pulls some serious weight. So his favor is, I'm guessing, bodes well. But he asked to put that in writing, so you have that in writing. They're scheduled to meet, I think it's the 19th or the 20th, this coming week. So we would have an answer, yes or no. But just wanted to make sure that you understood, no action you need to take, but just make sure you understand, A, the request that was made and the reason for it, and most importantly, B, that this does nothing to our accreditation. When we pulled back, I don't remember when the last visit was, I mean, it's been a long time, but when we pulled back with other schools, they kind of put a hold harmless in place, and they absolutely agree that this makes sense, so they're willing to allow. We're not falling out of the process. They'll still maintain connections with NEASC, use the resources. It just, we're getting an extra year to go and fully vet the plan.
Wonderful. Anybody have any questions? Great. So you'll, by next month, be able to
Be able to provide an update, yes.
Great, thank you. Now for your report.
Oh, my next two.
Your next two.
Kim was so brief, she threw me off. Now I was going to make comments.
Don't feel like you need to make up the time.
I can't win. I believe I covered the first item in regards to snow days and impact. As far as the student walkout, you heard about it from the student rep report. It was scheduled for today. I do anticipate that there will be discussion about a makeup. As she reported, there's certainly been some support, and that may be how they choose to proceed. But I will say nationally, there's been some discussion at the state level, at least, in regards to the eastern half of the state that was home today, that there might be a makeup. We'll be prepared for it. Certainly, we've worked with the students. We want to use this as an opportunity for a lesson in civic engagement, and if students are being mature and coming forward and saying we want to take a stand, our job is to allow them and help them to take a stand and promote productive dialogue. It's not our job to hold signs, so just to make sure that you understand the intention there, this is not a district-sponsored walkout. This is us protecting the rights of our students to voice their opinion and peacefully assemble, and we want to double down on that and use it as an opportunity for civic learning. So we'll see if that is rescheduled. There's a note in there about the police presence that was there on the Monday following the now quite famous rumor that was spread and the scare that it created. The intention was to have that police presence on Friday morning, and we had a snow day or a wind day or a flood day. I don't remember what kind of day it was. So one of the 9. But I just wanted to note in there the connection that we made with NEMLEC, which is, the Northeast Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council, in their STARS program, which is the School Threat Assessment Readiness. It's a team that is set to respond to schools, and they're a phenomenal resource. They have literally almost anything at their disposal. Those of you who were on campus that day saw them in their STARS, NEMLEC STARS jackets. Looks like an FBI jacket, navy with gold lettering. Says STARS down the arm. There are school administrators, there are firefighters, there are police officers, there are armed forces, there are school adjustment counselors. So for this response, this was a presence. This was people walking around the halls, stayed strong presence in the morning, gradually decreased during the day. They kind of went through lunch and just had the opportunity to talk to kids, reassure them we're here for safety. This is just about making sure everyone just understands when something is said, whether a rumor or otherwise, we take it very seriously. But I was very pleased to have that connection because in the event of any kind of true tragedy, they can respond with any level of resource that we need, and right on down through, they could have a van full of resource counselors here if we needed it. They responded a few days prior and did a complete controlled exit. I believe it was at Tewksbury. So in a matter of hours, they can be called and show up with walk-through metal detectors and scanners and be ready to go. So certainly, if there was a positive born out of that, it was a relationship that we made with NEMLEC, and I certainly thank the police departments for their coordinating of that. To note that we did meet with our snow removal contractor. We are going to put that out to bid or to get quotes after the now very famous ice storm that was not treated. Those chuckling are those that were carrying people across the parking lot. But just to make you aware of that, and the rest are items that we've been talking about, but you heard other updates throughout the course of the evening. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise,
Dan?
Just a quick question, Brian. It's great to hear that the relationship has been established with NEMLAC. Is that possibly a resource we may be able to go to down the line for potential grants or other kinds of things to upgrade?
my understanding is that they are a personnel resource for response. It's more threat assessment and response. They certainly have programs we have all their STARS plans, so we have binders at every school that have complete aerial views and maps and door mappings. So we have resources from them, but they're not an agency, to my knowledge, that comes up and says, here's write a grant for $20,000 to fund security cameras or what have you. It's more of a personnel resource.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Moving on to the 2018-2019 school year calendar.
So you are getting an update simply because this now has in January the high school exams. And then in June, you now have the final day with high school exams, and you have the graduation date set at June 8th. So nothing else changed. There were just those items had not been completely solidified, so it's just voting yet again just to make sure this is now a complete calendar that we can publish and send out to families, and people can start planning for next year so that they know to not schedule vacation before July 1st.
Make
We
a
have a
motion,
motion.
to make a motion to approve the 2018-2019 school year calendar.
Thank you, Deb. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Maureen. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Now to the big one, the FY19 final operating budget.
She was talking about me. So I'm going to hand this over to Michelle. Again, just to note, all this is tonight is codifying what we discussed 48 hours ago. But now Michelle can, again, we're not going to go through great detail, but can point out exactly where that landed. And then I'm going to do a separate piece of paper because it's not part of the budget. It's thinking, and we'll do that afterwards so it does not get confused as something that you're voting on this evening.
Okay. Well, the final budget or proposed budget is hot off the presses, literally of a couple hours ago. I want to turn your attention to page 6, the narrative.
We don't have the new ones.
That's why the pile's so large over there. Patty, I was like, why are there so many budgets over there?
Yeah, me too, when you said
Sorry about that. We'll
hot
get
off the
them.
presses, kind of scared us.
He's literally, we're printing it. 6:03. I was supposed to deliver your copy. I'm sorry.
It's funny because I was like, oh, well, good thing I brought my own copy.
No, I had internet at home too.
Thank
I
you.
lose cell service. I lost cell service during all the power outages.
Ooh, every other one.
It'll last for like 6 or 8 hours. They can do it. Outage.
Okay, go ahead, Michelle.
What page did you say?
Okay, page 6, when you get an opportunity to turn it to, on the narrative that had been added today.
It's hot off the presses.
And I just realized that we do not have the motions printed out for you.
No, we don't, and I was going to ask that too.
Yeah.
They were in,
Brian, if you want to go into the tentative, do you have iDrive
Is it
on
the
there?
tentative?
The tentative
Yeah, so
budget
that we
has
can
the
have those
motions on it.
motions. Thank you.
I don't have my iDrive for some reason on my computer right now. Technical difficulties. So turn your attention to page 6, the bottom of the page there. The principal features of this proposed budget. We just wanted to, after all these changes that we've been discussing, wanted to point your attention to the major changes that are in this budget. Most of the increase is due to the cost of doing business, including the changes to personnel, contracts, benefits, fixed costs, et cetera. This budget does have the addition of improvements for student safety, which includes the Raptor visitor management system we talked about for $7,000, and the new discussion that we had on Monday evening of adding $50,000 for cameras at all school locations. It does include one special education teacher for Pine Grove and one special education teacher at Salisbury. Both of those are due to current requirements. It has significant increases for the out-of-district tuitions. Mainly, this is just because of our funding scenario and the reduction of our available funds in circuit breaker. It does include a reduction of a data specialist position from full-time to half-time. It does include a reduction of an office clerk position from the central office from full-time to half-time. It does include the reduction of one full-time middle school foreign language teacher, which would be a result of the aligned schedule. It also includes a reduction of 2.6 full-time equivalent classroom teachers, and this would be due primarily to electives due to student enrollment. It would not be the reduction of any program per se, but many less sections of a program. And most of those reductions would actually be a teacher that is currently scheduled at 1.2 and bring them back down to full-time at 1.0 where they should be. So there should not be any significant unemployment cost to us or anything like that. And lastly, it includes the reduction of 1 full-time classroom teacher at Newbury Elementary, which is just due to the enrollment of the class size and the shift moving on. So now on to, if you turn to page 12, just to mention, page 11 was the list of the changes, which brought it to the tentative budget of an increase of $3,130,272. That was the original proposed increase for the tentative. And from that point, we worked on reducing that as much as possible to get to this point, which is now on page 12. And these are all the items that were discussed on Monday evening, for those of you who were here. Some of these lines are just broken out into a little more detail than were in the green chart that Brian presented. But pretty much it's the same. So we have electricity, which is a substantial increase due to all of our solar credits being fully used at this point. General office service and supplies. The total of all those lines combined total, including the 2 Chromebook carts or Chromebook leases, were $48,000. Substitute teachers, if we bring down the increase, which the increase at this point, we're not sure where our actual need is going to lie for this fiscal year. As someone mentioned earlier this evening, we're only 50% through that budget. However, our personal day season is just beginning. But to be in a line with where we were last year, we were proposing an increase of $51,000. We're going to reduce that at this point and take that gamble. Removing the intrusion alarm repair and the stair tread maintenance repair. Hopefully we can find grants or other funding sources to make those happen. Math specialists, we will continue utilizing them at halftime at each of the elementary schools, which is a savings of $114,000. At this time, we are proposing to delay the implementation for at least the FY19 school year of the new special education program at the elementary level. Health and dental insurance had a decrease of $229,000. This is primarily because our health rates came in at 7.1%. We had been budgeting at 11.1%. Defibrillators, there's a new mandate coming in July 1st, so we had to add some new defibrillators. In addition, we have to replace many of them that have reached the end of their useful life. And we actually have a savings of $4,000. We were initially budgeted $12,000, so we're going to need about $8,000 for that. Special education tuitions, we are anticipating our circuit breaker reimbursement to be at 75% for next year. And our current budget for the tentative budget included 65%. So the shift in changing from the 65 to the 75% is about $66,000. We'll remove that from the operating budget because we will now have the circuit breaker funding source, hopefully. Special education tuitions, we're reducing that by another $50,000. We currently have a change to one of our enrollments that has already occurred, so we're hopeful that we can maintain that savings at this point. And that was a change just a couple weeks ago. The foreign language teacher at the middle school that we spoke about because of the middle school, high school schedule alignment, $41,138. The high school FTE reductions for those additional course offerings, $170,039. Data specialist position, the half-time, maybe equivalent about $25,000. The central office clerk position is savings of about $20,000, reducing that to half-time. The reduction of class sections or offerings for kindergarten and preschool. At this time, our enrollment numbers for our half-day kindergarten classes is a lot lower than the half-day enrollment is higher, and the full day is less than we've seen in the past. So therefore, we do not necessarily need to have 3 full-day sessions at each of our schools. So we may have to have 2.5 sessions. So that'll be a savings in addition to we do not necessarily need all of our preschool sessions that we're currently offering. And lastly was the increase of the surveillance cameras for about $50,000. So the total of all those changes, taking the $3,130,000 that was initially voted on February 14th, taking all these changes of $851,632 brings our increase, operating increase, to $2,278,640. In addition, the one other item that did change since the tentative budget was the reduction of excess and deficiency being used as a revenue source. So that's on page 13. You'll notice they won't have the tentative budget here, but if you look at the first column on the general operating budget in yellow, we've always used a certain amount from excess and deficiency. Last year we used $100,000. Our tentative budget also included $100,000. And our FY19 budget is including 0 at this point, because we do think we're going to use all that this current year. So do we have any questions up until this point?
Anybody have any questions? Paul?
So the late buses didn't make the cut?
Not at this point. Do you want me to speak to that?
You can or I can.
Okay. At this point, we have had a very late game change, as late as 4 o'clock this afternoon. There is potential additional funding available in our special education transportation budget. We are hopeful, I should say, that that will remain in place in the coming months, and we can actually use that to implement late buses for at least the middle school, high school, and Salisbury Elementary School. So we actually had a discussion at 4 o'clock, literally when we were about to start printing this, do we make that change, do we not? So we decided not to include that at this point, because once it's in here, we don't want to have to take it away again if this actually does not become, the savings does not come to fruition. But at this point, it's looking like it's promising. But let's just hope that things remain consistent, and we can do that. Anything else you want to add?
So the only key point is then it is a transportation line that
Yes.
we can then just speak to the finance committee and alert you that we're going to spend it on late buses rather than, so it's not like it's
Special
transferring from a
transportation.
personnel to a benefit. It's there. So
Yes.
Anyone else? I would just like to comment, again, piggybacking on the conversation from Monday night. I understand why we're not putting that SPED program back in. I totally get it. But I am going to ask David that you really watch those numbers closely, and I think maybe proactively we need to start looking at putting a program like that in, if indeed, as in the last 2 years, we start to see more and more elementary school teacher or students needing that support. Anyone else?
Okay.
Do we have the motions for the?
no one else could have done it but Deb.
Deb's good at it.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2019 final operating budget in the amount of $41,311,667, with assessments to Newbury in the amount of $9,276,375, to Rowley in the amount of $10,355,513, and to Salisbury in the amount of $11,929,154, with the remaining balance of $9,750,625 being funded by state and local revenues.
Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I just
A
made it.
second.
I mean, a second, thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2019 final capital budget in the amount of $2,687,593, with assessments to Newbury in the amount of $150,832, to Rowley in the amount of $168,400, and to Salisbury in the amount of $608,817, with the remaining balance of $1,759,544 being funded by state revenue.
Thank you, Deb. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Maureen. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Again, unanimous. Okay, so that budget will be certified and sent to the towns tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
One day to spare.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Forget.
I made it big for you. There's no. The one thing I want to say is, just so that you're aware, that budget includes 50,000 for cameras, and it does include the funding for the Raptor visitor management software. Current thinking, Pine Grove is going to be well camera'd, I think is a safe statement. But that number could potentially put somewhere in the vicinity of 20 cameras on this campus, perhaps more, and 8 to 10 at both Newbury and Salisbury. That is something, with your approval in the final budget, I talked to Michelle today about how we can figure out how to do that sooner rather than later, which means that $57,000 is a non-negotiable if we get to a Plan B. But I think we all agree that that is something that's absolutely imperative, and it's something that I would like to be able to say we're working on by the time we get to summer. The tech team already has a really busy summer, so this being delayed to the summer actually throws a monkey wrench in there, what they have to get done. So just so that you're aware of that, we're going to move forward on that right away, just so that everyone knows. The second sheet that was just given to you, again, this is not a budget. It's not related to the budget. It doesn't look like a budget. This is current thinking. We had a discussion on Monday night. On Monday night, we were making some assumptions about, Chapter 70, aid and regional transportation. This document actually takes those assumptions out, as Narissa mentioned on Monday night. We would be now, you've moved your meeting to the 16th, we would be having this discussion and making a decision prior to any definitive information. We could have definitive information, a joint resolution could happen. I haven't heard even a rumbling of it at this point, but there are certainly the things that we could learn that would make those numbers a little more possible. But they are noted there that if we were to get Chapter 70 increase from 20 to 50 minimum aid per pupil, that would bring us in another roughly 72,000. And if we closed half the gap for regional transport, we'd get roughly another 150,000. But for this scenario, the purpose here is, we talked about these guiding questions. These will remain the guiding questions. I added number 7. Which is, what is that figure that ultimately can be supported by the towns in a Plan B option if the override scenario doesn't pass. So obviously there were late buses, but they're now not in the budget, so they can't be here as an additional cut. But the major change here is, you'll notice that the professional staff figure went from 10 to 17. And that is as a result of that. We don't have that 50,000, and then basically the 72 and 150, so the roughly 252,000, 222,000, that would be included from those additional revenues. So again, this is a picture. This is a picture we're going to keep talking about between now and if we do need to come back and make this decision. But this is something that, as a leadership team, we're going to continue to discuss. I appreciate them being here tonight. Certainly, if there's more discussion, we're ready. If for now we're leaving this alone and coming back to it, then we're okay with that as well, too. But I want to thank them for coming out tonight. Some feeling under the weather, and everyone dealing with their own snow days as well. So if there's any questions on that, happy to answer them. But just to paint a picture so that this becomes a public piece of information, so people are aware that if an override doesn't become a reality, this is what we have to do. And again, we were talking about 51 as a very rough figure a while ago, and I thought it was important to show that we've been able to figure out 750,000 in the final budget without significant impact. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot of places to go. So that professional staff of 17 would be across the board. And
I
we
beg
would-
to differ with the statement about not significant impact. That just rankles my nerves. But
I will accept that challenge, absolutely, and add the word, in comparison to this.
comparison to this
I appreciate that.
works. But
Absolutely. Yep.
I don't want people to think that the budget we just approved as the final budget does not have an impact, because it most
absolutely.
certainly does.
Yep. Well said.
Anyone else have any questions or comments on this? Paul?
I don't have a question about that so much, Gina, but I do have a question, and sorry for throwing this out at this moment, but Brian, when we lost that half day on a Friday because of the wind, the second half of that day was a PD. What happens to that? A couple Fridays ago, remember, you got the word because of the wind, and we canceled school for the whole day. It was when that event was supposed to
Yes.
happen.
I'm sorry, I was talking about thinking about the other half day that we did a late arrival. So technically, that is a full day. That is one of the 180 days, one
Right.
of the 183 for teachers. So at this point, I think we had a very brief discussion, was basically to not try and reschedule a PD day, but that would be a full day of school as it's made up as one of the 9 we're making up.
Okay.
Anything else? Does anybody have any questions on this? I think, quite truthfully, it's a little premature to start looking at this.
Yeah, and we have had a lot of formative discussions about where that 700,000 and those 17 people. But as we go through time, we have to have a much more definitive discussion about exactly where we make up that 700,000, because
Right.
that gets incredibly impactful.
Right, but I guess my point is, we're, to your point, saying that we're not cutting the 51 now, we're down to 17 professional staff, 6 instructional assistants, but that's a discussion really for leadership. I think if we start to come up with other
Yep.
projections,
Yep.
that's only going to muddy the waters and either panic people or give them hope. And
Absolutely.
right now, we need to, I think, try and let those waters try and calm a little bit.
Yep.
That's
I
my
agree.
opinion. Anybody else have any questions or comments on that? Thank you. And again, thank you for the principals for being here tonight. Policy and advocacy, Linda?
Yes, we have section C, D, E, and F of the policy manual to approve.
So do you want to make a motion? Or did you just make a motion? Because it's hard to hear you.
I'll make a motion to approve section C, D, E, and F of the Triton Policy Manual as amended and proposed by the Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee at their meeting on Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018, as a
Thank you,
first
Linda.
reading.
Do we have a second? Who seconded? Monique, thank you. Any discussion? Linda, were there any policies that you wanted to bring to the committee's attention?
No, not really. I mean, we were taking some out that were redundant, and we just added some wording and some others.
Great. So all in favor? Any opposed? The vote is unanimous. Thank you. Finance Subcommittee, Narissa?
Since it's budget season, everything that's happening in our subcommittee is happening here as well. So no.
Pretty much we're in the loop.
Yeah.
Thank you. P&N, like I had said earlier, we will be meeting with the TRTA on Monday, and then on the 21st, we will continue looking at the job descriptions that we currently have, reviewing those, and once we have some to bring to the full committee for approval, we will do so. Correspondence, we didn't have any. Anybody have anything else that they want to throw out there real quickly before we adjourn? Paul?
What's a blizzard bag?
What's a what? A blizzard bag?
That's a good question. So,
Could
how
be
long
many
do we
different
have?
things.
No, it's okay. I'll take it up after,
Okay,
but I just
no,
have no idea
here's
what you're talking
here's the
about.
2 minutes. So you remember in our district strategy, we listed Wakefield in their Learn Anywhere project. So they have taken the concept of remote distance learning. They talk about school year learning, summer learning, and they layered on a snow day alternative learning to that. So there's those that are really well thought out, part of an extended learning, and then there's, hey, you send home an assignment and call it a school day. So it runs the gamut. DESE provided guidance last year that allows a district formally, because it had never been discussed, to set a plan for alternative learning days. So Masconomet has done it on a pilot. Amesbury has done it. A lot of schools have tried it. I would say it's mixed reviews. I've heard from a lot of parents, elementary kids, who end up doing homework all day with their child. If there's a way to make the learning meaningful and purposeful, I would be all for it. But I think that's a hard thing to plan that really well and then to pull it off. It generally requires web access. If we're talking about those who don't have access or those who don't have any power, then it becomes problematic. So if we're going to talk about it, and I've said this, I'll say this publicly because I've said it several times to many parents, I'd be willing to entertain it as a solution if, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the way Masco did it, we would build in 5 snow days. If we use 5 snow days, then we would pilot it the first year. 6 and 7 would be a blizzard bag, and we need to figure that out. The term blizzard bag literally came from a company that was selling blizzard bags, like big money, packaged, ready to go. If it's a snow day, you take it home with you. But that's the concept. So I think it's something we certainly can't do now, but certainly something we can review for the future. And I think if we do come up with a plan, it's got to be one that we feel comfortable actually counts for a day of school.
And not just busy work.
And not just busy work that keeps the parents busy. And then there are some people that say, I don't care if it's just, coloring, as long as it keeps us not having to go to school until July 1st. So there will be very strong and varied emotions on this concept when you're ready to have that discussion.
All right.
Say that one more time?
Yeah, we're going to put that on the agenda for next
For
month.
next month, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
I rented my clubhouse for the next one. Jen asked me for the 27th.